Hello, everyone. Welcome to the President's Live Briefing. We have about 188 people who have registered to join us today. And with that, I will turn it over to President Lemons.
Thank you, Joshunda. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this briefing. Joining us today are, again, Provost Nwosu and Vice President Rene Rotolo. So this afternoon, I'd like to begin with good news that you've likely already seen, that the proposed change to the rules governing international students with their F1 visas, that was a really unneeded and unfair rule that was proposed that actually was made, has been rescinded. So it's always nice to get some good news, particularly from those quarters. While it's welcome, and I know it's a huge relief for international students at Lehman College and CUNY and across the country, not to be facing some really unbelievable circumstances and having to completely disrupt their lives. So we're happy about that. It's also, I think, to me, it reinforces the importance of our activism and making our voices heard. We signed on with a lot of other member organizations with the American Council of Education in opposition to that rule and in support of the legal challenge that was led by Harvard and MIT. We know that many students and many other voices were raised in opposition to that rule. And I think that what that tells us all is that it is worth our while doing that. And once in a while, we succeed in an important way, and this certainly is one of those ways. Wanted to give you an update, which I had mentioned last week on the President's Campus Climate Task Force, which is a 12-person group that's agreed to help us expand our efforts at Lehman College to build a campus community that continues and expands the way we protect and value and respect every dimension of diversity on campus. I met with that task force for the first time this week and charged them with what it is that they are to do for us over the next period of months. I've asked them to help us build on the rich diversity of Lehman and start out by assessing our current college racial climate and then developing a set of recommendations for actionable steps that address our often inadequate responses to racial difference in classrooms and across the campus. The Campus Climate Task Force will work through this fall to deliver a complete set of recommendations to me by December 15th. But this is urgent and this is highly significant work, so I've also encouraged the task force to propose specific actionable steps that we can begin to take as soon as possible, hopefully in the fall term. So I want to thank the 12 members of the task force for agreeing to spearhead this really important work for Lehman College. I look forward to learning more about what they propose in ways that will help us to emerge as a stronger campus, as truer yet to the legacy of our campus and the values that we hold. I will be sending out an email later today that will have a little more detail about the task force and about some other things that I want to update the campus on. But I will, just for those that are here this afternoon, the members of the task force are first two co-chairs, Joe Farah, Associate Professor, Chair of the Senate Governance Committee, and Gladys Maldoun, Chief of Staff to the President. And then Melissa Castillo-Planas, who's an Assistant Professor, Aziz Alimi, undergraduate student, Jermaine Monk, Assistant Professor, Ann Rice, the Professor, Sherry Deckman, Associate Professor, Vanessa Arche, who is Head of Reference in the Library, Suzette Ramsender, who's our Associate Director of Student Life, Nick Boston, Associate Professor, Fausto Ramirez, who is our Director of Campus Safety, and Stanley Bazile, who's executive in charge of student affairs and dean of students. Very happy about this group. I think it represents the campus very well, and I know that they will do important work for us as they give their time for all of us in the next months. Wanted to add something we haven't covered today, and that is a little update on the campaign for Lehman College. And I have to start by just thanking Vice President Susan Ebersol and her team in institutional advancement, who have done the work to make this happen. The college launched the campaign for Lehman College on March 31, and the goal was to raise $1 million for immediate aid for students that were suffering from food and housing insecurity, for raising needed scholarship funds, and for emergency funding for students, as well as general operating funds as they rise. We've raised, and note this, we have raised to date $1,009,509. That is in cash and multi-year pledges. So we have exceeded our goal. And for that, we have to be thankful, and I think it's real cause for celebration. It really says a lot about this campus, and it says a lot about the support this campus has in the community and beyond. So the impact of that, a total of $645,000 is for this fiscal year, and for the following 3 years, that's for food and for microgrants and direct student aid. The equivalent of about $46,000 or 1,800 bags of groceries through the virtual food bank e-cards that we have been issuing, debit cards, and grocery bag distribution. Microgrants totaling 207 at an average of $570 have been distributed to students for their immediate needs. And we know what those are: rent, telephone bills, Metro cards, utilities, and just other urgent support that's been needed just to keep life moving. We received $150,000 from the Robin Hood Foundation, and that was distributed already by the end of June to 212 students who were not covered by the CARES Act funding and therefore were not able to receive those direct funds to students in the CARES Act funding. And then scholarships, there's an additional $210,000 that's been raised for scholarships. 130,000 of that is in expendable scholarship aid for the coming year, and 80,000 for an endowed fund. We had an amazing response on campus. Faculty and staff through the Lehman Cares Fund Drive contributed $52,000 for student relief. That's for the food bank and microgrants. So while we've been able to meet some of the needs of our students based on the funding available this year, we need your help to assist the more than 500 students that currently have unneed METs, a number that we know is going to rise in the coming months. In order to meet these and the anticipated needs of our students in the fall, we're increasing the campaign's goal to at least $1.5 million to help get our students through the end of this coming academic year. If you want to further support the campaign for Lehman, you can find a place to do that. It's on the website. It's lehman.edu/campaign for Lehman. No spaces in that. And again, I want to thank everyone who has already contributed to this amazing campaign, which I think is precedent setting for the college. And I fully expect that we will meet that $1.5 million and hopefully will go beyond that goal as well. So I want to turn to some questions right away that have come in, and note that we have Provost Nwosu, we have Vice President Rotolo here. We'll be watching the what comes in over the chat in terms of other questions. But I want to start with a couple of things that have come up in the past week or so that I'd like to address. One of them is something that really has to do with students who are no longer with us, those students who have graduated, but it's possible that either some of those students are still on today, or those students are in contact with some of you that are. Because we were not able to do our graduation the way that we would want it to have done it, and because of working remotely and all the difficulties that has presented, not only did we not have a graduation ceremony that we wanted, but also the distribution of diplomas has been a little more challenging than it usually would have been. And we know that some students, hopefully all students have received their diplomas, but we know there were some issues with diplomas being damaged, either handled in the mail and so on. And also students haven't yet received the covers for their diplomas, but we will be, we're addressing that. We're responding to students who get in touch with us, and we are going to be sending out to students the covers for their diplomas so that they don't have to come to campus to get them, or they don't have to have a long delay to get them. So we are working on that. An important closure for a very important group of students for the college. So before I go on and address any other questions, I'd like to, this is totally impromptu now, so I'm catching the Provost and Vice President Rotolo off guard, but I know they can handle it. Because we're in such a changing scenario with regard to what's coming up. The immediacy is what's coming up on campus, and in terms of folks being on campus, but also what's coming up in the fall, and has anything developed since last week. So I want to start with that first question with Vice President Rotolo. One thing I will say, ahead of her remarks, is that we know that the CUNY Central Administration has finalized the documents around, which are guidelines really for the CUNY campuses as we prepare to have a few more folks on campus. And so we have actually not received those yet, but we will receive them today yet. And that will be something that is really going to be a living document, even that's going to come to us in a formed way, but it's also going to be put up on CUNY's website, and that's going to be modified as the weeks and months pass by, because things are going to change and in ways that we really can't predict. But as I hand this over to Vice President Rotolo, I just want to say that the group that she has put together, the task force to work on our own campus planning for having people on campus beyond where we are now and going forward, that work has gone extremely well. I know, and it really is addressing already probably most of what we will see today when we get the formal CUNY guidelines. But Vice President Rotolo, I'd like you to pick up there and tell us anything more that you think might have developed since last week, or just even it's fine to reiterate, because some of these things, it's good to hear more than once.
Thank you, President Lemons. Hello, everybody. Lehman, it's nice to be back with you again. There have been some developments since we last spoke about this. First, I have to say the working group has been tremendous in putting together the plan. We have what we have now is a final draft that we just need to make sure aligns completely with CUNY's finalized guidelines. And once we receive that, the working group will get back together again and do that. What has also happened since then is there is a mandatory training that anyone who comes on campus must take. We will be sending out a memo regarding that, so that anyone even visiting or just coming to pick up supplies must take the training first, and it's available on Blackboard. So we'll be sending out a memo with the information on the training, how to access it. There's also a screening now that's required for everyone. So you'll be getting a link to a screening app. It's not an app, I'm sorry. You'll be getting a link to a screening form, which you can then submit. IT's done a tremendous job in taking a paper form and turning it into an electronic form that we're able to easily submit and receive prior to your coming to campus. So these are kind of pre-return to campus processes that are now in place. And then once we align our plan with CUNY's guidelines and we're ready to submit, we will make it available for the public to see, to have any questions. Another aspect of it will be once we receive all of the final surveys and we see which departments actually require to be on campus in order to successfully continue working because they've been having some trouble working remotely, or there's functions they can only do on campus, we will then work directly with those departments to develop their plans because they will be required to have individual plans for how they will bring their people onto campus, how they'll set up their staffing, especially if they're in a shared office space, how they'll stagger their staffing, what their hours will be, and what procedures will need to be put in place to ensure a safe and healthy environment for everyone. So that's where we are right now. We're probably still a week or so away about being ready to share with everybody, but you will be receiving a memo giving you access to the training that will be required for every member of the college community and the link for the screening form as well.
Great, thank you. That is new information.
Yes,
Lots of new information. So Provost Nwosu, what would you like to tell us about developments around the fall academic continuity and so on?
Thank you. Thank you, President Lemons. Good afternoon, everyone. And you are right, the developments are just happening so fast. A few minutes ago, right before this meeting, EVC Cruz held a meeting with chief academic officers and also had prior meetings today with chief enrollment and chief student affairs officers. We now have a deadline of July 25th to ensure that all of our information in preparation for courses to be offered in fall are entered in CUNY first. And shortly before this meeting, I sent a few members of our colleagues information to ensure we meet that deadline. And so it is not that we have not been working towards, and preparing, as you said, we have actually been working. And yesterday, the small task force, as I mentioned to the campus community last week, that there's a small task force that we have in place to review the submissions from the schools, from our deans, from our department chairs. As folks probably might think, we have over 2,900 courses planned for fall this semester. And initially, as we received these submissions last week, we had about 237 courses that were being proposed to be offered on site in person. But again, following discussions, review of of those submissions, as of yesterday, that number came down to 39. And by this morning, the number actually further dropped down to 24 sections. I believe that as the task force continues to work through these courses and engage in department chairs, engage in deans, that we would come down to something even smaller or lower than the 24 that we currently have. And so that's good news. Most of the courses will be offered online. They're being entered in the system at the moment. The other good news that I also want to share is that the plans for the reopening of our research labs, that plan has been completed as well. And I believe you'll be signing off on that, President Lemons, sometime today, and that will be sent to CUNY for approval. With regard to the document you mentioned, we will be receiving that document sometime today. It's the update number 16 memo on academic continuity that provides additional guidance for us to ensure that the things that we are recommending to be offered in fall are consistent and in alignment with the expectations that CUNY has asked us to ensure we follow and also the state guidelines. The other 2 points I want to mention have to do with where we are with enrollment. We're doing fairly well at this point. As of this morning, VP Sarmiento reported that we are 2% above where we were at the same time last year with regard to fall enrollment. And with regard to summer enrollment, which is closed at this point, we're at 12% up from where we were last year. So that's very, very good news. And in fact, we're also up with regard to undergraduate enrollment and graduate enrollment for summer this year. So much more higher by 12 and 13% above where we were last year. The final point I want to make as we continue to prepare for a largely online offering in fall and minimal in-person instruction in fall is that we will continue the professional development opportunities. We'll continue to offer the professional development opportunities we offered to faculty. The online workshops that are offered through the School of Labor Studies will continue. We've had a number of our faculty be part of that, but also our own on-campus workshop through the Office of Online Education will continue aggressively. We will have a very strategic focus on adjunct faculty. We've been working out the details on how we will continue to implement that. We have developed a 75-minute workshop called Just in Time Online Workshop. We will continue to offer those workshops as well over fall, in preparation for fall over the rest of the next several weeks. We're also working with CUNY on a training workshop for our students based on what's been done at hostels. And the idea is to scale this out to all of our students across the entire system. And the final point that I will make also is that we are part, Lehman is one of 5 CUNY colleges selected.
It's like we had an interruption there.
A quick update that I am providing as we prepare for fall.
Excellent. So again, that is a lot of new information. One of the questions that came in today actually was about both about training, but also what tools are going to be available in the fall. And one question was about Zoom. And the university is in the process of doing a university-wide license for Zoom so that it should be widely available in the fall. And so that's something we can count on. Also, for if there are faculty members that have been using Camtasia, what I understand is that we will probably have a university-wide license for Camtasia, which would be great because that makes it available to all instructors. And just to plug, if you haven't used it, it's a really great tool to for teaching, for putting material online that can be built right off of PowerPoint. So there's a lot that is happening, and Provost, I believe I'm correct in also saying that the training will go on. There'll still be training opportunities into the fall for faculty members, right, to continue to be trained in these different tools.
That's correct. That's correct. And
Great.
we will provide that information through our online office, and of course, working collaboratively with the IT office in that regard.
So, Provost, I wonder if you could, we had a little problem with your audio right at the end of your comments. Could you just go back over what you were saying about Lehman being a part of the 5-college group?
Yes, thank you very much, and my apologies for the audio difficulty there. Towards the end of spring, we were selected. Of course, this was open invitation to CUNY senior colleges to submit a proposal to participate in this national initiative designed really to train faculty on how to engage students with the population we serve. And this was actually funding that was to be provided by the National Association of System Heads. Ultimately, CUNY got selected. We were one of the 5 colleges whose proposals were accepted for this grant initiative. The funding CUNY received, and the work to begin to train faculty, 60 of them of the 300 selected across the system amongst those 5 schools. That conversation began this summer, and it's actually a whole 1-year initiative that really prepares them on how to teach in a diverse classroom. There are components of technology, virtual experience as well. And then, of course, issues relating to how you work with students to close the equity gaps in the classroom in terms of student achievement. So there's a lot packed into that whole 1 year. And we've been working with deans, and of course, they will be working with chairs. The focus for us is really on gateway courses. That's the focus of that grant. And those gateway general education foundational courses are courses identified as areas where we have high failure rate. In our own instance, pretty very high, because it was informed by an analysis that we did through our IR office in spring that identified a number of courses where we have very high failure rates or dropout rates. And so in the sense of this proposal, if all goes well, it will impact 19,000 plus enrolled students in courses such as math, philosophy, music appreciation, and a variety of other courses where we have seen, where we think we need some additional improvement. So faculty have stepped up. We're working towards this to ensure that this is a successful experience.
It's really a great program, and that's a high impact. That's over 15% of our faculty members, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. So that's,
Learner's office is our Office of Online Education is the one I've asked to coordinate this work, working closely with the 8 departments were identified based on that analysis, where we believe will have a significant impact on the quality of learning for our students.
excellent. Vice President Rotolo, here's a very specific question for you. When will the Apex be open?
Oh, good question. I don't have that answer. That hasn't actually in any of the guidelines that I've looked at, either from New York State or what we've received so far from CUNY. There's been no mention at all about either recreational facilities or performance facilities. They seem to have been moved into another phase outside of phase 4 for New York State. I don't have a definite answer on that yet. We're still waiting for those guidelines to come out.
Okay. We're used to answers like that.
Yeah, that's the way this year has been going.
Maybe we're getting too used to those kinds of answers, but unfortunately, that's just how it's been.
Yeah, I was never really good at that, but I've gotten a lot of patience.
So one of the questions that I've seen just in the last week, I think, is around the GRE, requirement for the GRE by the Graduate Center. And Provost, you may want to add to this too, but the question has been around the requirement. But the Graduate Center, as I understand it, has dropped the requirement for the GRE for the fall and spring semesters. And the question that kind of followed on that is that going to apply to Lehman's graduate programs as well? And so I don't know if you want to add anything to that. I know that it's been suspended for the fall semester at Lehman. And I don't know if you want to comment on, the spring semester.
The way, thank you, Mr. President, we're also exploring that for spring semester. We're probably likely to go in that direction given where we are headed with regard to fall reopening. It's one of those challenging exams that you think through, identifying testing centers. Those are some of the issues that our students have raised. Finding the right equipment to deploy in taking the exam, taking it at the right time, and so on. So we considered a number of those factors and said that it would make sense to suspend it for the moment. And then also in conversations with enrollment management, that was a recommendation that came from them. And I suspect that that would be the case again for spring semester. And then we will reevaluate the efficacy of that exam for what we're trying to do at the college in terms of graduate enrollment.
Thank you. One of the questions that has repeatedly come up from students is around fees and the refund of fees, or what will happen. We know that 25% of the student fees were refunded for the spring. What about going into the fall? And really, it's a very good question. And on the face of it, it seems like maybe there's an obvious answer to that question. So I wanted to give a little bit of information about the fees and kind of where we are with fees going into the fall. So even though we're not on campus, a lot of the things that those fees cover are activities that are ongoing. And so they allow us to stay connected with students. They have impact on students' academic progress by supporting online resources that we provide to students. They also are important for services that we have been maintaining, and I'm sure that these services will go through some changes in the way that we're delivering them in the next few months. But for instance, the food bank, which has gone virtual, but as possible will become in person to some degree in the coming months. The child care and counseling centers, Veterans Affairs, Health Services, Career Services, all of these have been just as essential and remain just as essential, and have personnel associated with them that need to be supported to maintain those services. And so those are all areas that we really need to keep going, and can only do that with those fees. We had, one of the things that we had is as you know, is a very large demand for loaner laptops. Vice President Bergman talked about that last week in the session. And that's ongoing, going on into the fall. And you know, these are resources that, well, those are not coming from the fees that students pay, except for obviously the support for tech fee, which supports a lot of our tech infrastructure that supports students. And so, you know, there you can envision that there's just about every facet of the tech fee is still being employed, whether it's online access to library journals, which we pay for through their practice exams for nursing, support of the health center in an online mode through the student portal, help desk resources that assist students, you know, with all the issues that come up, current and new students with logging on, getting passwords, and so on. So there are, when we look at all these things, what we really find is that the large group of these fees are covering services that we are still needing to provide, and in some cases have an even greater need to provide now that we're in an online environment. So hopefully that, you know, that addresses some of what's been raised about fees and what their purpose is in a campus that is in the fall anyway going to be around 90% or more virtual in a distance mode. Now, there is a question here that it's not about a fee, but it's about membership that maybe Vice President Rotolo can respond to, because I have to say I cannot remember where we are on this issue, but it's the issue of membership in the Apex. And maybe you can give us a little insight into what our thinking has been around that.
The discussions that have gone on so far have been around providing a credit to everyone that'll be applied towards once the facility actually opens. So we're in the new fiscal year. You would normally have to re-up your membership, but instead of that, you would continue your membership based on the fees that you've paid already.
Great. So, Provost, I wonder, this takes us back to your comments about the NASH project. What departments, are there specific departments that are going to be supported through that project, or is this project, I mean, you really talked about kind of the gen ed area as being the focus. So are there departments, are these really more course and faculty focused?
Yes, Mr. President, it's faculty and course focused, but the courses and the faculty live within a department. And so we did identify those 8 departments where those courses live. And these are courses actually where we have significant enrollment, because part of the proposal, when we submitted this, it said high enrolled courses, because what CUNY wants to see is high impact and students' ability to be successful. We have a very good history at the college with the work that's gone on in a number of departments with course redesign. Chemistry is one such example, with the work done by Donna McGregor there, Professor Donna McGregor. So really, it's that kind of work that we're trying to replicate and expand in a way that takes into account the learning styles that our students bring into the classroom, and use that particular approach to redesign and rethink the way courses are delivered. And to also learn how to do that online in a virtual space, which is what we presented with the COVID environment. And math has also done a good job in that arena. Interestingly, for the courses we identified, math is included in that space. There are about 5,000 plus students in this particular 2 classes where students have not done well. We have music appreciation, that's another department, and there are a few others that we have. So the idea is to work very closely with those departments, with the particular faculty members teaching in those courses. And then it's not just leveraging those 60 faculty. Recall, Ms. President, you had approved also funding of $100,000 in course redesign. That was actually the initial funds we utilized to begin that work on rethinking those courses. So combining those opportunities, the funding from you, and then the funding that comes from the CUNY proposal, that would give us a significant impact. And that's why we selected those high enrolled courses where we have high, what we call DWIF rate, drop, withdraw, incomplete failure rates. Where we also saw at the minimum 19,500 enrolled students. If we do this successfully, that would actually move them across. It's also very supportive of our 90 by 30 goal to ensure that students are making progress towards the academic momentum goal of CUNY, and certainly ours, in a way that helps to remove bottlenecks and advance our students' ability to do well in these courses. So this is very, very important project.
Great, thank you.
Welcome.
I've had a question about, which is a kind of a fundamental about anyone who comes to campus, and this goes to the guidelines that we've discussed already today. And it really relates to screening. So I think I would put it in that category. You know that we've seen, probably all of us by now have experienced entering somewhere where we've had our temperature checked. And so the question is around, you know, what kind of screening is going to be required to come onto campus for either students or staff or faculty. And again, Vice President Rotolo will follow me with her comments about this, but I served on the CUNY-wide task force to address this issue of screening and testing that laid the groundwork for the CUNY guidelines that we're receiving today. And so spent a good bit of time discussing this and the pros and cons of various approaches. And, you know, it was evolving nationwide as we were deliberating. We were seeing what the California universities were doing, both the Cal State system, which decided very early on that they were really going to be largely online, just as we are at this point. But we also saw a system like a university like UC San Diego who said, we're bringing everybody back, but we're going to have a comprehensive testing program and test everybody as they come on, and have some kind of testing scheme where we can continue to monitor through the term. CUNY is not doing testing on its own. We decided early on that, for one thing, it just wasn't feasible for us to try to do that. It's very difficult to have that level of testing available. And so that wasn't something that really was an option on the table for us outside of special conditions in certain cases where we will have folks go to be tested. But screening, certainly, because screening is one of those, not foolproof, but it's one of those steps that we can take to try to keep the campus safe and try to not have infectious individuals on campus. We're not going to be requiring a negative COVID test before somebody come on campus, but we are going to require that every day before anyone comes to campus, and this is beginning now, that they will complete a screening. And we're using the screening that New York State has developed. And so New York State is really trying to get a uniform kind of approach to screening across the state. And I guess we can be happy about that, since New York State was declared, I think today, to be the #1 state in response to the COVID-19 crisis. So we will be using New York State's standardized screening that everyone will do before they leave home. And so that's the level at which we will determine whether someone can come onto campus. As I said, we know that's not foolproof, that screening will miss asymptomatic individuals, but it should catch folks who know that they've been exposed to someone, even if they don't have any symptoms. And so it will help. It's not going to be 100%. It's not even going to be probably 60%, but we'll take anything that we can get in combination with all the other safety measures that we will take, including wearing masks and hand hygiene and so on. So, but I think that Vice President Rotolo, you should say more about the screening approach, and also maybe just about the way that approval is given to come to campus.
Thank you, President Lemons. Actually, you covered the screening and testing very, very well, so I'm not going to go over that again. You covered it all. But you know, as I mentioned earlier on, there is a paper form that IT is converted to an electronic form. That's what we'll be using temporarily. CUNY is investigating and working to develop an app that'll make it a more automatic process that you'll be able to do on your phone. But access to the campus is not open access, as we've had in in our entire time being open. It is by appointment only. It is a scheduled access only. It has been since March 16th, when that first Monday after we actually closed and left, not closed, but actually left campus. And it will continue to be throughout the pandemic. Allowing free access onto campus.
We lost you there, Vice President Rotolo. We lost you for about the last 30 seconds.
Can you hear me now?
You're good now.
Okay, so until we return back to normalcy, access will continue to be scheduled only. So you cannot just come to campus and expect to get in. There's a process. You'll schedule through, if you're a faculty or staff member, you'll schedule through your divisional VP or via your school dean, usually going through your departmental office. And if you're a student, you'll either, we will be setting up processes to schedule appointments or ways to come into campus for business functions or to use services for those reasons. You will need to screen at home. If you answer no to all questions, you will be allowed to come to campus. You will have to show proof that you answered all correct questions correctly and that you were allowed to come to campus. That'll all happen before you actually get on campus. We're going to maintain minimal gates open. We're only going to have 3 gates open. Gate 5, the main gate on Goulden Avenue. Gate 8, the main gate on Paul Avenue. And gate 13, the main gate on Jerome Avenue. So it's going to be a very controlled access, very controlled appointments to get to campus. And we need to track everyone that's there. We need to maintain and track your screening reports, and we need to report those weekly to CUNY Central and to HR.
Great. Thank you for that. I think that that is the part that I think we kind of have to keep emphasizing, is that we've never been closed, but we're also not open.
Not open, yes.
Provost, I wonder if you can elaborate a little bit. You know, we've got, we think about 90% or more of our classes in the fall are going to be online distance classes. But what about lab classes, classes that are studio classes where students will come in and need to do hands-on kind of work? Is there more that you can say about that, what we can expect?
Thank you, President Lemons. And I'll ask VP Rotolo to also comment on this. This is why the steps we are taking, it's been a very important one to this process. The reason we asked our deans to work very closely with the chairs was to identify what those courses that could actually be offered on campus, on site would be. And so part of our conversation really is to identify or finalize what those are. I mentioned at the beginning that we had 200 plus, and then we have this 37, and now we have 24 today. Once we know what those 24 are, and there are studio classes or music or theater classes or whatever lab courses there are, then we move into the next stage, which is what we do to provide the support services that students will need to ensure that they're successful in those experiences. And that's where the question about chemistry lab, biology lab, I think that's where that's coming. If it happens that one of those courses is on that list, then of course we will also be making an arrangement to have that opportunity for on-site support on campus. If not, we will have to think differently how we support that virtually. And so that's really getting to that final number, which Senior Registrar Yvette Rosario and VP Rotolo have been working very, very closely with our chairs and deans on is really key, and we're almost finalizing that. And then it moves on to the next question. What kinds of support services, what kinds of social distancing will be required? What kinds of support will be needed in order to ensure that we have a successful experience? Some of these will also be hybrid classes. CUNY has provided us with definition on online, what's on-site, what's hybrid. And in some examples we've received in some courses that some of the schools have recommended, for hybrid, they're simply saying, we will stay online for this, and we will have our students come on campus for an exam. The nature of that exam, we're still also going to be working out on the details and when those will take place. So there's a lot going on there, but we've made huge progress. And VP Rotolo can comment as well in terms of the conversation she's having very closely with our chairs and deans.
So in areas like labs or studios, the facilities office is working directly through the deans and the department chairs to develop plans for how many students can safely be located in each of those situations. So let's say, for example, a typical biology lab, biology teaching lab. I think we identified that 6 students can be in at a time. That's 25% of the class. We're using a little more stringent requirements than the base requirements based on different information we've been given about how long aerosols stay in the air. So we're using 10-foot max distance between people as our guidelines for developing those layouts. So the facilities office is already working with the deans on that so that we can determine exactly how many people can be in at one time. Some of the more complicated ones that we have to work directly with the schools on, and we're gathering information on it, has to do with the exams. Because when you have a class of 90 students all needing to take an exam at the same time, it's very difficult to accommodate that safely in any of the spaces. So we're working with the departments to figure out better ways to do that. Because we're not going to be able to do them all at once, or we may have to do them in 2 separate spaces if we're going to do them simultaneously. So all that planning is in process now, and we anticipate within the next week to maybe 10 days, we will have all of that together and be able to then present the plan of where we're at.
And I must also add, Ms. President, that part of this is also that we're working on a communication plan to roll this out to our students and our faculty as well. That work has already begun, and that will happen in phases. So at whatever phase or stage we are, we will be providing information as we get closer to the beginning of the semester. But it's important that we meet the deadline that we have, which we got today, which is the July 25th. That's next week. We never really know when these things come, but that's been the story of our lives, as we navigate this experience. So, but the good news is that we started on time on our campus, and we're making progress, and there's been some discussions already with media relations and enrollment management. And we had discussions this morning in our Provost and Dean's Council as well about that communication plan. And then we will phase this out. And then students need to know, faculty need to know. And as we're also doing this, we're entering the information in CUNY first, so students can actually have some clear sense of how the classes will be offered, and faculty would also begin to really finalize their preparations.
Excellent. So, Vice President Rotolo, if I can come back to you with another one of those very specific thorny questions.
Sure.
There was another question about, similar to the Apex question, what about parking? Folks who have paid for their parking through the spring term.
So let me give some background on parking and parking fees first before I actually give an answer. Parking is part of the auxiliary enterprise. The auxiliary enterprise is a separate nonprofit corporation of the college. The reason parking is part of the auxiliary enterprise is because the state of New York requires that parking, our parking lots, everything associated with parking be self-sustaining. In other words, the college cannot support that with our tax levy budget. It must be supported through the collection of fees for the parking, and that goes towards maintaining the lots and everything else. So that being said, so you understand, as you can imagine, with everything that's happened in this last 4 or 5 months since March 13th, the auxiliary enterprise has lost a tremendous amount of money. So we've had brief discussions about how we're going to handle parking. And one of the aspects of the auxiliary enterprise as a separate corporation is that it has its own separate board. And the board has not yet met to discuss both parking fees, how we're going to handle parking fees from last year. So it hasn't been decided yet. It needs to be decided at the first meeting of the board, which should be scheduled sometime in the next month, at the very latest towards the end of August. So for now, I can't give a definite answer on that. What I can tell you, though, is that everyone's parking passes are good until the end of August. So there is still time, and you can utilize your parking pass if you come on campus. But I will be able to give you a definitive answer about a credit once the board has had the opportunity to meet and to discuss it. So I'm sorry I can't give you a definite answer, but once we do have an answer, I promise I will get it out to everybody.
Great, thank you. One of the benefits of doing what we have to do now is we're all learning about all of these different aspects of the campus that we didn't know anything about before, including how parking is paid for. So we're approaching the end of our time. I think that will be all the questions that we're going to be able to handle today. Again, I want to thank everyone for being with us and for being with us through these sessions. We will not have a briefing next week, but we will pick it up the following week. At least that's the plan at this point. So I wanted to end with something that I just noticed today, and I think it really struck me because last night I was telling Mary, my wife, that this is such a perplexing time when every day we're not only hearing about the developments of this pandemic in other parts of the country, and it's pretty dramatic, alarming news, but we're hearing lots of other things, including the actions that wouldn't have to be taken to limit environmental regulations, and it seems like there are no end to those steps that are being taken. And I was telling her it's just really one of those times when it's a real challenge to maintain your sense of there being an arc here that we'd like to think there is. And then I came across this little snippet from Nicholas Kristof, the op-ed writer for the Times. So I wanted to share it with you as kind of a way to end today. So he writes, 2/3 of Americans were asked in a poll to describe their feelings about the condition of the United States, and they offered fearful as their take on the United States at the moment. Just 17% were proud. An astonishing 87% said they were dissatisfied with the state of our country. So let me interrupt the despair to introduce a new thought, hope. Yes, our nation is a mess, but overlapping catastrophes have also created conditions that may finally let us extricate ourselves from the mire. The grim awareness of national failures on the coronavirus, racism, healthcare, and jobs may be necessary as a prelude to fixing our country. The last time our economy was in this much trouble, Herbert Hoover's failures led to Franklin D. Roosevelt's election with a mandate to revitalize the nation. The result was the New Deal, Social Security, and a 35-year burst of inclusive growth that arguably made the United States the richest and most powerful country in history in the world. So I took that to heart, and I hope that all of you will too, because I think that is not actually just a a hopeful but desperately hopeful statement. I think there's really something there, and I think we really might be in that kind of a moment, not only nationally, but I think even within our university and within our college, we have those kinds of possibilities. So I hope you'll take that away with you this evening and carry it, think about it. And with that, I want to wish everyone a good evening, a good weekend, because I know the weekend is now beginning, which is great as well. And so have a great one.
Bye, everyone.